Alright, hey guys, I'm UnoPro back with part 2 of Beating the Meta with Cat. And today have to say I'm extremely excited because today we're going to be going over Yukiko. I think she's such a cool hero, and not only that, we have an awesome replay for you guys. In fact, instead of me playing the game this time, it's going to be between two really high level players, MnMvSmarties and jkkk89. They're both really great players. We have MnM on Cat, one of the best Cat players in the world, arguably even the best. And we also have JKK, winner of multiple Gold Cups, consistently at the top of the ladder, two outstanding players. So before we get into that, we're going to do a quick summary of Yukiko and some basic strategies against it. So Yukiko is quite a balanced deck, so there's not a lot of key cards I would say for it, but in beating Yukiko, there are a couple of threats we really have to play around. So we've got Geyser and Ice Meteor, two of the strongest spells in the game, both from the Water School. And playing around Yukiko, these two spells are key for how we need to play. And then I've also included the Coral Priestess, a really high value creature and often used in conjunction for Geyser and Ice Meteor. So even if you can play your creatures in a safe fashion, you still need not to be careful to overcommit to Geyser, Coral Priestess past turn 6, and then Ice Meteor and Coral Priestess after turn 9. So we need to play around these cards. We do have some answers for them, and there are ways which you can make these cards not as strong as they might be. And often if we can position well, Geyser can just be a 3 mana, deal 3 damage to a creature. And if we can do that, then we have a good chance of beating Yukiko. So for Cat is a very balanced deck, and so is Yukiko. So naturally, when you're versing this deck, there's not a lot of key cards for the matchup. So basically I've just chosen a couple of cards that I think are quite important to winning, but not necessarily core cards, or cards that will win the game by themselves. So the Day of the Sanctuary is really good against Yukiko because nearly everything in the deck that does damage to a creature needs to be targeted. So we're stopping Geysers, we're stopping Ice Meteors, making sure to think about which one he'll target to use the Ice Meteor or Geyser. It also helps us against Outmaneuver, Kabuki Seductress, which will stop our creatures from attacking, and also New Zephyria. So we've also got Black Skull Shredder. One of the ways Cat can win against Yukiko, and a couple of other decks can, is by pressuring her and rushing her down. And Black Skull Shredder is one of the best cards to do that. Yukiko can also be quite slow at closing a game out because it is a very controlling deck, which can also allow us to build up time to make a combo with, say, a Shredder and a War Tent to push through that final damage. For the third card, there wasn't a lot that was key to beat Yukiko, but I put in Zephyria, and that's mainly to represent all the uniques that Cat will be running, or maybe any other deck. It is possible for Cat and some other decks to play a longer game with Yukiko. Yukiko does have a really strong late game, but if it doesn't have the resources to build up a nice hand, we can actually outvalue it in the long run, as our creatures are bigger, stronger, and the uniques are especially good at that. Damran can come in, kill one or two creatures. Zephyria can bounce a card back, move one to kill another, or can be used as a finisher. So I've basically put Zephyria in there just to represent all the uniques. Okay, so the game plan against Yukiko. Now, Yukiko is a late game deck, and once it gets to 5 magic, it has access to Ice Meteors. Once it gets to more resources, it can play Coral Priestess with those Ice Meteors. So that can be quite a strong late game, which normally we don't want to get there on even terms. So we want to apply early game pressure, we want to force Yukiko into bad trades, having to defend, and then later on we can have a chance still, or we can try and kill her early. So one of the strategies you'll see good players using against Yukiko is to really zigzag your creatures to avoid those Geysers and Ice Meteors. Now you can come into a couple of Chain Lightnings, but the card itself is fairly weak, so we're mainly playing around those Geysers and those Ice Meteors. And those are the two ways that Yukiko is really going to get value on you and can really turn a game around. It is possible to play a card advantage game against Yukiko. So what I mean by that is, we're playing for value, we're killing off creatures when we can, and we can actually have our hand grow bigger than Yukiko. So what this means, and what I think is really cool in a lot of matchups, is, let's say you get to full magic, you get to full might, you get to full fortune, and you can see a play where onto an empty board you can play a 4 and a 3 drop at 7 resources. Now, what can often be the best play is once you get to a certain threshold where you've upped all your requirements, it can be really nice to just make sure you draw a card every turn. And in that way, if your opponent can't do the same, or if they have to catch up on requirements, or have to spend more resources to defend, then in the long run we're going to be drawing more cards than our opponent. Now in Duel Champions it is harder to gain card advantage, but against a control deck like Yukiko, they need to have cards in hand, and if you can outlast them while continuing to apply pressure, then you can win in the long run when Yukiko is left with a few odd creatures and maybe 1 or 2 spells. So if we can play carefully around those spells, we can use our creatures to their strongest extent, then we can actually play a longer game against Yukiko. So I'm going to get into the game. Really excited for this one. 2 absolutely brilliant players, both playing at an extremely high level, so I'm just going to get into that right now. Alright guys, we're in MnMvSmarties vs jkkk89. The cat will be starting off first. Not preferable, but cat has versatility to come back. So MnM will mulligan. Not the best hand he's come into. Missing out on his 1 drop, but not the end of the world. Yukiko isn't going to rush him down or apply much pressure. And you see Yukiko starting off that Shark Protector, just trying to get the defenses out there early. Now MnM realizes that the Shark Protector is going to be blocking off most of the 2 drops in his hand, so he's just getting that Storm Mage Protector out, and is actually one of the better 2 drops against a Shark Protector, as it can eventually get up to a high level where it can threaten to kill the Shark Protector and still live with 2 HP. Now obviously, for any creature without immune to retaliation, it is quite difficult to deal with the Shark Protector. So MnM moves the Renar Harpy and the Goblin Scout into the top lane, deciding to create a bit of a power lane. Now obviously Broken Bridge is a possibility here, but a 2 and a 1 drop, which will take up JKK's whole turn, is just not good enough, and as you can see he's going against it. Now he moves the Shinji Warrior up to the top lane, threatening to trade with both the Renar Harpy and the Goblin Scout. MnMvSmarties sees this, and decides to play a War Turn. Now, it may not seem like the best war turn ever, as it's going to still kill off the Harpy, but the Shinji Warrior is one of the better creatures in the game, and that war turn is still going to be there for later. So we're quite happy with that trade. Now I just wanted to talk for a second here. He has the option of using the Day of the Sanctuary on either the Storm Mage Hunter or the Goblin Scout. Now what he's doing here is, he thinks about doing it on the Storm Mage Hunter, but the only thing that's protecting it from is simply Geyser, and he's happy if Yukiko geysers the Storm Mage Hunter and then trades. That's not a big deal. Geyser for a 2 drop and takes up an attack, it's perfectly fine. Now what he is playing around here is he's playing around a Coral Priestess, outmaneuvering the Goblin Scout to the bottom row, and because the Kabuki Propagandist is a melee shooter, we'll be able to kill that off. Now often Yukiko players should be saving their Coral Priestesses for their geysers and ice meteors, but sometimes if you have multiples in hand or you're wanting to gain an early lead, then that's a perfectly acceptable play. So that's why he's chosen to target the Goblin Scout there. Now JKK does have a couple of options here. He's wanting to continually increase his magic so he can get to those ice meteors. He does have the threat of the War Tent in the top lane, so he needs to consider that possibly a Shredder coming down and dealing 4 damage could be potentially harmful. So he chooses to play the Kabuki Seductress, but because of the Day of the Sanctuary, he is also unable to target the Goblin Scout. So that gets 1 account attacking, and by doing that last turn, he threatens to play a Shredder this turn, killing off the Kabuki Seductress. Now he doesn't have it in hand, so unfortunately he can't do that, but he chooses to play a Blood Snake Shaman, threatening the Blessed Lake Water Spirit, and with that Insect Swarm in hand, not going to be doing anything until this card is killed off. So JKK coming up to 6 resources here. Quite a few creatures on board. He's managed to stall out early and got some good defensive creatures out, with the Shark Protector and the Kabuki Propagandist going to be slowing down his opponent. We can see from MnM's choice of positioning, they choose to put the Goblin Scout in the bottom row with that Shark Protector. The reason he's done this is preemptive strike is really going to do nothing against the Goblin Scout. Now MnM knows this game isn't going to be rushed. He's missed that window, so he's happy to kill off the Shock Projector slowly, even if that means that he's going to take up 6 damage, which jkkk is likely not to allow. So we can see the broken bridge being used just to get that Blood Snake Shaman onto the board. He has no real answer for it, and jkkk is really planning just to increase his magic so he can deal with it with an Ice Meteor or something later on. So still 2 turns away from that Ice Meteor though. So as we can see, jkkk is developing quite a strong board, which is also well protected by that Blessed Lake Water Spirit, preventing any double Insect Swarm or just even a single Insect Swarm to do some damage to his side of the board. So MnM knows this. He knows he's going to need some kind of comeback with possibly Insect Swarms, and so he's putting this Black Skull Crusher down to threaten the Lake Water Spirit. Now jkkk playing a very interesting card here. He's playing the Aura of Frost, which is going to give all friendly water creatures Frozen Touch. Now with a strong board like jkkk has, this will allow him to lock down his opponent's creatures, as they won't get a chance to attack back, and they'll be stuck in a cycle of being frozen without any way to respond. Now he has a couple of water creatures out here. He has the Kabuki Seductress and the Blessed Lake Water Spirit. Unfortunately for jkkk, the Kabuki Propagandist is not a water creature, and for some reason the Shark Protector is neither a water creature despite being a shark. So he's going to continue there. So he chooses to take the retaliation damage on the Kabuki Seductress because it's going to prevent that Black Skull Crusher from attacking. And he doesn't really mind that that's being put into Insect Swarm range, as he has the Blessed Lake Water Spirit out again. So he's choosing to play a bit slowly here, just defensive board. Now MnM's going to go for the time of need, looking to create a comeback, and this is a really nice move here. So what he's done is returned the Propagandist to the hand, and then he's allowed it to kill off the Kabuki Seductress with the Storm Mage Hunter. Now jkkk is getting up to that 5 magic, allowing him to play Ice Meteor, which he does on the bottom row. Because of the spell ward, of course, the Black Skull Crusher is not dying off. Now it's not the best Ice Meteor he could have, but still managed to kill off a Goblin Scout and a Zephyria. Now MnM obviously knew this. He knows he's going to have to get those Ice Meteors out of hand eventually, and he didn't want to play Zephyria in the top row, because then it would be locked down by the Kabuki Seductress with the Aura of Frost. So he chooses to accept, sure, I'm going to lose the Zephyria and the 1-drop, but that's not really a big deal. So jkkk is left with a couple of options here to play the 204 Shooter or the Blessed Lake Water Spirit. Unfortunately for jkkk, the Kabuki Sentry is also not a water creature, but he's not too worried at 14 health about leaving the Storm Mage Hunter open to attack, as it's only dealing 1 damage. Still no potential clears for MnM, as he doesn't have the Insect Swarms and the ability to kill the Blessed Lake Water Spirit yet. So he's just going to play the Blood Snake Shaman in the bottom row, and applying a lot of pressure with that Black Skull Crusher and a War Tent. No easy way for a Yukiko to deal with that. It has to die to multiple outmaneuvers to be removed off, which still won't kill off the War Tent. So he having a choice in which one he wants to target here. Now obviously the spell ward will be huge, so it's unlikely to target that. So he chooses to target the Shaman. Now this basically allows him to play it in the bottom row, threatening those 2 creatures as basically being untargetable. Even if it was targetable, it would still need a Geyser also, but this even prevents an outmaneuver after hitting with both, and then moving to the top lane. So there's basically no way it can die now, as Sanctuary's not going to be running a lot of buff spells, definitely not going to be running Wicked Mercenaries, as it's a very control based deck, so it allows him to present a huge threat with that Blood Snake Shaman, and jkkk is left in a difficult position with only 1 creature available. So jkkk makes a nice move here, outmaneuvering it to the top lane to lock down that Shredder with the Aura of Frost, and that's really going to prevent the Shredder from dealing more damage, as with that spell ward he has no way of dealing with it, and low attack creatures on the board, it's very hard for him to deal. So he's forced to sacrifice the Kabuki Sentry to the Shaman, but luckily enough deals 3 damage to it, so even if he could get off a nice insect swarm, he's not going to be hit for a potentially lethal amount. So MnM does have the double insect swarm, and that is one way he would gain board control back. But at the moment, that Blessed Lake Water Spirit still doing a lot of work for him, as JKK is free to develop his board without fear. So he basically decides he's going to play 2 elephants, really hard threats to deal with, but he does play into that Ice Meteor. Not the end of the world though, as he still has a big threat with the Crusher and the Shaman in the bottom row. So JKK is able to trade off here, and as we can see, his hand is kind of lackluster. Now this is what I'm talking about with Yukiko. It is very strong late game, but it can run out of steam quickly. If it doesn't draw those Ice Meteors and Geysers, it can be left with a bunch of fairly mediocre 2 and 3 drops, which really cannot pressure the opponent at all. So we've seen MnM has been down on board control for the last 5 or so turns, yet he still has only taken 6 damage, and there's really no pressure. So he's able to slowly develop his board and set up pieces for combos and try and return on the board. Against other decks, Yukiko would have been able to punish earlier and not giving him so much time, and he'd be forced to defend earlier. So simply attacking, it's passing the turn, keeping that Shredder, that Crusher frozen, unable to attack. Now MnM, he does have the opponent down to 8 health, and with that Shredder there is damage potential, but he knows that he does need to regain ball control. So MnM decides to play the Harpy, which he'll quickly sacrifice with the Sacrificial Altar to be able to deal 5 damage to Yukiko, and then allowing him to play a Shredder for another 2 damage, putting him down to 1. Now the reason he can't Sacrificial Altar one of his creatures to the Kabuki Seductress is because it has been frozen by that Aura of Frost. So great work from JKK, managing to lock down that Crusher that could otherwise be extremely difficult for Yukiko to deal with. So making sure to Rise of the Nethermancer, as we should always do, with extra resources, and that's just most of the time just for Phoenixes, if we're not playing against Necropolis or other decks. So he's put his opponent down to 1, but he does have the board control, so he's going to have to be able to clear off every lane with 2 creatures, which he does go for here, and he's still not vulnerable to Insect Swarm with those triple Blessed Lake Spirits, and only 1 creature on the board which can't in fact attack. So he's looking okay. MnM's hand is not looking too strong, with that triple Insect Swarm that's basically going to be doing nothing, just a firebolt to each Lake Spirit. So MnM not in the best situation here, but he does have his opponent down to 1 health, and again the problem with Yukiko is being highlighted in that it doesn't have enough pressure. It can let its opponent draw back into the game because it doesn't have those creatures that can deal enough damage. Now I'm not saying Yukiko is weak. Yukiko is an exceptionally strong hero, and I definitely recommend it to a lot of you. It can deal with creatures from Stronghold, and it's possibly one of the best counters. But MnM does draw the Broken Bridge. He's able to Broken Bridge, unfreezing the Shredder, able to play it again for the win. So I hope you guys enjoyed that game. I really enjoyed seeing the gameplay from 2 high-level players. I feel like there's a lot to learn from, even if you don't play Cat, even if you don't play Yukiko. Just the positioning of them, playing around those threats. So we really need to understand. We analysed that game. When MnM played the whole game, not once did he really give off a nice Ice Meteor. The best Ice Meteor JKK got was the Ice Meteor onto the Elephants, being able to trade them both off, but by carefully zigzagging his creatures, using that Day of the Sanctuary to prevent being blown out by outmaneuver, he was able to consistently deploy more threats than Yukiko could deal with. Though he did lose board control, he was able to drawn to some answers and drawn to that broken bridge because Yukiko wasn't able to apply pressure enough. Now I think both players played that game exceptionally wrong. There was no obvious mistakes whatsoever. A very even matchup. Hopefully I can bring you guys some more pro level games as well as some of my own, just to express some thoughts about how to beat those matchups. Now, Cat and Yukiko can be quite difficult to verse because they're both so versatile in their decks. Now, it's not like Masafar where you can decide I'm just going to Cosmic Balance, or Immolation decks where you can just get a creature with magic resist and win from there. Cat and Yukiko are going to have a very well balanced deck where they're going to be playing lots of threats, lots of answers, and they can win against everything. So in playing against those, you really need to fight for board control, and you need to play well. It's a skill matchup to a great extent. And as you can see, two high level players. JKK did regain the board control, but was not able to pressure enough to prevent MnM from drawing that broken bridge with the Shredder. Though we can see some of the potential that Aura of the Frost was used, able to consistently freeze his opponent's creature. It's not a card we see all the time, but JKK using it to great extent there, and if you can get it down on the board without being punished the next turn, they can really lock your opponent's creatures down, though it does have the weakness of needing a strong board, which can be hard for Yukiko early game. So that's all for this series. I'm really excited about today's series and about some upcoming matches I have for you guys, so I encourage you to subscribe below, and I appreciate any feedback you guys can leave for me, or mention any heroes you'd like to see in the future. I do plan on covering most of the metagames, so I will try to improve as we keep going. Thanks for watching, guys.